I had. When you see Greece on fire, I saw those documents. I also spoke to the inventor of the euro, Bob Mundell, and who said, basically is saying this was in the plan. The idea was he wanted to make sure that there was a sell-off of all the government properties in Greece, etc. You have to set a fire if you're going to have a fire sale. He thought that this is the best thing that's ever happened. These guys, this was the purpose of the euro. He said he was very upset, he told me, that democracies get to kind of vote on their fiscal and monetary control. He wanted to create a mechanism, the euro, which would make elected parliaments and congresses and presidents subservient to an economic formula. And the economic formula is called the 3% rule. There's a German word which I can't pronounce that they use, but that was the purpose, was to basically create something that would replace democracy. In fact, by the way, I spoke with because of my position, I get to meet all these heads of state, etc. And I've met with Carlo Monti, the new prime minister of Italy, the new chief of Italy. And Monti, has not been elected. He's just a banker. That's, you don't get to choose anymore.
They call him a technocrat. I mean, even The Economist says it's good to not have countries run themselves. We, the technocrats, will run it now. And as you said years ago when you got to meet, with the head of the organization, the World Trade Organization, they admitted this is how we were going to take over. But then they're the ones that sold the fraudulent debt and got the governments to sign on. They're the ones that actually have most of the debt. And so they do this Svengali judo move where they're set up as our bosses, even though they're the progenitors of it. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, in fact, in the case of Greece, I call it a crime scene. In particular, the Greek government, to stay within the euro, both the so-called socialists and the so-called conservatives there, had cut a private deal with Goldman Sachs to hide their true deficits. And this was true of most of the countries, but this was particularly done with Goldman Sachs and had to do with trading euros into yen and dollars and back. Technically, on paper, it looked like Goldman Sachs took a multi-billion-dollar loss. Well, Goldman Sachs never takes a deliberate multi-billion-dollar loss. That's nonsense. In fact, it was covered up by a secret agreement to pay them back at massive charges, with massive usurious charges. I mean, you couldn't call it anything else, plus a $500 million fee on top of the massive interest rates that they were collecting, all done in secret. When this came out, of course, then the Greek bond market, the market for Greek bonds, completely collapsed, and people rightly, in a way, asked for massively high interest because, they say we're victims of a fraud. Now, why? Someone asked me, actually one of the band members from, if you remember, Dire Straits, asked me, well, how come they weren't arrested? Well, the United States, the Securities Exchange Commission is supposed to arrest the government of Greece because, after all, it was a conspiracy between two governments and Goldman Sachs. And here's the deal: instead of Goldman being busted, they get money from the European Central Bank. They get totally bailed out. They get fees for handling the bailout, and then their guys take over the country and they buy up the assets of the country, the shipping, the beaches.
Wars.com. Speaking of austerity, the globalists want their post-industrial world. Over 90% of the debt owed in Greece, Ireland, Iceland, it's all come out in the news, is not owed by the people. Their traitorous government officials, formerly servants, signed on to Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and others' derivatives fraud, and are saying the people have to prop up the too big to fail. But that was a few years ago when they signed on to those deals. We forget now, the media tells us it's our debt. Yeah, because we signed on to their too big to fail to prop them up, so the very bankers that did this can lecture us all day. The globalist deindustrialization program, the post-industrial world they want, so we're all poor under their control, is working quite nicely. And the Europeans are starting to wake up, though, to the fact that in Iceland, Ireland, Greece, and other areas, over 90% of the debt, again, is derivatives that they don't owe. They're just being signed onto it. And now the Greeks are revolting, saying you're raising our taxes, cutting our benefits to pay foreign banks. And here it is. The bank runs in Greece will soon be followed by bank runs in other European nations. The economic collapse wrote, and I hope that's not the case, but we're already seeing some of that happening in Italy because all of these countries have signed on to the globalist fraud machine. Here's another one. Greeks withdraw nearly $1 billion from local banks. Giant lines because the rumors are they're going to devalue the currency and go off of the euro. Here's another. Italian bank shaken as economic slump deepens. The bankers have got them just where they want them unless they wake up and say no. Here's another one out of Bloomberg. Euro economy to sink as Spain, Italy re-enter recession. They never left the recession. They're in a globalist depression. Areas of Spain have got 35% unemployment. They're telling us our economy's great. Those of us living in the real world know it's not. Again, how much BS are we going to swallow?